Hi, I'm Seán Duggan, and welcome to TheFIX, a podcast about Lightroom, Photoshop, post-processing, and all the cool and creative things that we get to do with our images after the shoot. On this week's show, I'm going to be talking about the return of the book giveaway to TheFIX, as well as kicking the tires on Boundary Warp, the latest new feature to appear in the most recent updates to Lightroom CC and Camera Raw 9.4 in Photoshop CC. Stay with us. Well, I hope you are having an excellent week, wherever in the world you are that you have your weeks, and whether you're tuning in via the video version of this podcast at our website, thisweekinphoto.com/TheFIX, or on YouTube, or whether you're tuning in via the audio version on iTunes or some other means. Hope you're having a good week, and I hope that the pixels are being kind to you and that in your photographic explorations you are finding great light. That's what photographers always want to find. We want the good light. So I mentioned in the intro that the book giveaway is returning to TheFIX, and the book giveaway is generously sponsored by Rocky Nook Press, and they have a lot of really excellent titles in their catalog. Let's actually go and pop over there and take a look. You can find more about Rocky Nook at their website, rockynook.com, and they have a lot of really great photography books. They are books from photographers for photographers. They have books about types of photography like macro and capturing the perfect lighting, to software titles, camera manuals where they kind of dive in really deep and go beyond the camera manual that comes with the camera. So a lot of really great titles there, and they are generously sponsoring our book giveaway. That is going to be a regular feature here on TheFIX. And for this week's giveaway, since our subject of exploring Boundary Warp kind of touches on landscape photography, because panoramas, which is what Boundary Warp is for, panoramas are often used in landscape photography. So the book that we are going to be giving away is The Art, Science, and Craft of Great Landscape Photography by Glenn Randall. So that is the giveaway this week. And to enter this giveaway, all you have to do is leave a comment on this website page, thisweekinphoto.com/TheFIX, and find the webpage for this particular episode, episode 52, and leave a comment. And what I'd like to have in your comment is I'd like to hear some suggestions for what you would like to see featured on future episodes of TheFIX. So that could be the work of a certain photographer you admire. It could be post-processing techniques, of course. It could be an interview with a photographer or somebody else in the photo industry. Of course, our general focus, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, our general focus is on post-processing and the things that we do to our images after the shoot, but that is kind of a wide field. I mean, it encompasses all sorts of things: backing up our images, ensuring that they're safe for the future, copyright protection, publishing in a variety of formats, whether that is web galleries or books or something like that. So, there's definitely a lot of subject matter there beyond just techniques in Photoshop, Lightroom, or other software, or plugins for other software. So, I would really love to hear from you in terms of what you'd like to see covered on future episodes of TheFIX. So please log in to the comment mechanism there and leave a comment and a suggestion for what you'd like to see. That's all you have to do to enter. And then from one of those comments that is left, we will randomly choose a winner and get in touch with you, and Rocky Nook will send you a book. So that is all you have to do. And as I said, that is going to be a regular feature here on TheFIX. It may not be every week, but it certainly will be a very regular feature where we will be giving away a book from Rocky Nook Press. So, cool deal. All right, on to the next order of business here. Next order of business is that I just returned from a week down in Southern California where I was recording 2 new courses for lynda.com. And as fate would have it, the week before I went down there to record at lynda.com, I had a new course that was released. And then the week that I was down there, another new course was released. So I have 2 new courses that came out within the last week and a half. And they are part of my Photoshop compositing project series, which is a series of short courses all designed around a Photoshop compositing project. And the 2 new courses that came out were product photography compositing, so how to take a product shot, not only take a product shot and composite it, but also tips for how to actually create the product shot from scratch, especially if you don't have any sort of a studio setup. I share kind of some cool ways to create a really low-cost studio setup for photographing small to medium-sized products, and then we take that into Photoshop and composite it into a different background and do some cool things with it, including transforming label art with smart objects that you can replace and update the label art with. So that's the product photography compositing course. And then the other compositing course that just came out a few days ago is adding a person to a group photo. So we take a look at some real-world examples for adding a person to a group photo, and also some kind of fun examples towards the end of the course in a bonus chapter where I assume the guise of a mysterious character and I add myself to some vintage historical photographs. So that's what's new on my lynda.com courses, and I'll put links to those in the show notes. And that is that order of business out of the way. And on to our primary topic for this week's episode. We need to kick the tires of the boundary warp feature that has recently been added to Lightroom CC, as well as Adobe Camera Raw 9.4, which is for Photoshop CC. So this is a feature that is only available if you have a CC version of either Lightroom or Photoshop. That, of course, is the Adobe Creative Cloud subscription plan. So in Lightroom, it's the 2015.4 update, and for Camera Raw that you would use in Photoshop, it's the 9.4 update. So what Boundary Warp is it is a way when you are creating a panorama merge of several frames in either Lightroom or in Camera Raw, it's a way to warp the boundary areas of the image to expand it so you don't end up with these irregular shaped panorama edges that you're probably familiar with if you've ever made panoramas in either of those programs. In the past, what you had to do is crop the panorama to get rid of those irregular edges, or you'd have to use a combination of some other features such as content-aware fill and maybe adaptive wide-angle filter, maybe some other methods to fill in the details. And this is just a lot more elegant. In most cases, there are situations where it doesn't work quite as well. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. I'm going to put on my tire-kicking boots, and we're going to dive into Lightroom and take a look at it. Let's go. All right, so in Lightroom here, I have selected a number of panorama series to work with, and we're going to take a look at a few of them just so I can point out some of the cases where it works really well, and other cases maybe where it's less successful, although in most cases it's pretty amazing. So I'm going to start with these 8 frames of a view taken up at Donner Summit in the Sierras, which is not far from where I live. I'll select them all here. I'll go up to the photo menu and I'll choose Photo Merge Panorama. and we'll let it generate the preview. May take a few seconds for that to happen. All right, there's our preview, and let me see if I can get this any larger just by making the dialogue bigger. Well, no, I guess that's about as big as I can get it. So, at the moment, you can see that auto crop is turned on. So let's turn auto crop off and see what that would look like. So there we have it. There's the typical uneven edges that you are probably used to if you've ever done panoramas. And as I mentioned earlier, in the past, what you had to do is you had to crop it. And of course, that is going to come in a little bit on the image. Depending on how the panorama falls on that kind of empty canvas there, and how level you were or consistent you were in framing your images as you pan the camera from side to side, you might end up with a panorama that has a lot more exaggerated irregular edges. So the boundary warp feature is just right down here underneath auto crop. And as you move this slider, you'll see that it is expanding the boundary to fill in the edges. If you turn it all the way up, it's just going to do a great job. And, that does a much better job, actually. Let me turn auto crop on. And then if I turn this off, you can see how it definitely is giving us a little bit more top to bottom room there. Now, let me point out one thing about what's happening here. As I move this boundary warp slider, you'll see that it's not just that it is warping the boundaries of the image outward, there's also a little bit of kind of inward contraction of the canvas area. So it's kind of doing both. So you can see here that that canvas area is actually moving as well. But it does a pretty good job. And of course, you can try different projection methods here. Right now I'm on spherical. If I do cylindrical, it's going to give me a slightly different result. It's actually kind of going to give me a little bit more height there from top to bottom if I do cylindrical. So that one looks pretty good. So that is all there is to it. Let's cancel this and go out and take a look at a different one. Now, actually, before I do that, let me mention one other thing. This is also available in the Camera Raw dialog. And in the Camera Raw dialog, when you select a range of photos and you go into Camera Raw, so for instance, if you were selecting a range of photos in Adobe Bridge, and then you chose to open those up into Camera Raw, you'll see the film strip on the left side of the Camera Raw dialog, and you can have all your images there. And then there's a little menu up at the top next to the film strip where you would open it up and choose to merge to panorama, and that's how you would get into that in Adobe Camera Raw. I'm not going to go into Adobe Camera Raw in this episode here, but I will put some links in the show notes to a couple of videos that Adobe's Russell Brown has created, which shows him working with the merge to panorama feature and boundary warp in Camera Raw. One is kind of a basic video, and another one goes a little bit beyond the basics to some advanced techniques for fixing some things after the merge is done using smart objects and the liquify filter in Photoshop. So it's quite useful. All right, so let's come over here and let's choose a different panorama. I'm going to choose this one taken here at the Valley of Fire in Nevada. We got 6 pictures here. Again, I'm going to come up to the photo menu and choose Photo Merge Panorama. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. For those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, obviously this is a pretty visual podcast since it's designed to show things in processing software, and we're talking about photographs a lot. So I'm going to try to kind of give you a visual picture of what's going on if you are listening to the audio version. On this one, as opposed to the previous one, we have a lot more irregular edges, especially up in the upper right and the lower left. It's just a lot more area to fill here using the boundary warp. And it's coming up using the cylindrical projection method because that's what I used last time. If we go to the spherical method, we're going to get a slightly different result. I don't really like that result too much. This kind of rock here, the central rock dome, looks a little bit compressed. When I look down and see what it looks like in the original pictures down here in the film strip, it seems like it's a little bit more compressed, or maybe it's just a little bit more elongated in the cylindrical one. Maybe that's what it is. And in some pictures, depending on how they were shot, the perspective option may not work at all, such as is the case here. I'm going to go back to the cylindrical option here. And then we will turn on auto crop first. And you can see that in this one, auto crop is just a total failure because it actually crops off the top of that rock formation. Let's go back to spherical and turn auto crop on. And again, you can see it totally fails. So the boundary warp is really going to help us with this particular picture. So as I scale that up, you can see how it is warping the image to try to fill that in. And here you can really see, I think, much more so than in the Donner Summit panorama that I showed earlier, is that you can really see it's a combination of the picture warping outwards and the canvas that it is resting upon kind of contracting inwards. But in this one, there is a much more pronounced distortion taking place. The main thing that I notice is that there's sort of a slant to this rock formation right here. And I notice that when I move it, that slant kind of goes away. And this sort of other kind of rock pillar here right in the center seems to be looking a little bit more straight up and down. So whether or not that sort of distortion is going to be acceptable to you, only you are going to be able to make that call. That probably is a really personal sort of thing. Essentially, with any sort of feature like boundary warp or free transform or perspective correction, even lens profile corrections, what you're doing is you're trading one form of distortion for another form of distortion. And typically what it is you're trading in an unacceptable form of distortion, or a form of distortion that you'd rather not have. You're trading that for a form of distortion that is better or less objectionable. So that's what's going on. So whether or not this much distortion here in your landscape pictures is something that you would like really just sort of depends, I guess, on your own personal aesthetic. I'm going to switch this back to spherical and take a look at it. That one doesn't seem to be quite as bad. And, maybe some of that warping is just coming from or not warping, that kind of like slanted aspect to that one part of the rock formation here in the center. Maybe that is just coming from the fact that it is putting those together, and that's what the kind of unwarped panorama looks like. I mean, certainly that is very acceptable. It looks really good. It's quite amazing. Certainly speeds up the panorama merging process. Now, another way that you could get around this, or at least have it not be so extreme, of course, is that when you're shooting your panoramas, be sure to just give it extra room on the top and the bottom, because if you know that a little bit is going to have to be cropped off anyway, if you shoot with that in mind, you will have a lot of extra image area, a lot of extra pixels that can be cropped off without losing anything critical, such as, in this image here where the top of that rock formation is cropped off. All right, so that is, a landscape image where perhaps the results were, maybe not quite as good in terms of how they sort of distorted the rock formations and the almost the slant or the tilt of the rock formation. However, that's being fairly nitpicky. I mean, this is one of those things where, if I applied this and looked at it after, a day or so, I might not notice anything objectionable. I'm going to cancel this here. And actually, let me look at a version that I have already done of this. And let me look at two of the images that have the that central rock formation that I was kind of concerned about. I'm going to press N on my keyboard in Lightroom to go into the survey mode. I'll press Tab to hide my side panels. And we can sort of look at this. Now that I look at it, there is definitely a change where this kind of central wedge here seems to be less slanted in the panorama version. But, it is a pretty pretty amazing job that it's done this. And I think, you know, my hat's off to the Adobe engineers for coming up with this. It's pretty darn cool. All right, so let's go and look at another one that has some different elements in it. So I have these 3 shots here. So again, we'll go into the survey mode. These 3 shots of a train in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And this has got some different challenges in it because it's not just a pure landscape shot. So let me go up to the photo menu. Again, I'll choose Photo Merge, Panorama, and we'll take a look at this one and some of the problems we might run into with this. Okay, so here's our basic panorama. Again, we've got, you know, significant white area on the top and the bottom, but the basic merge looks pretty good in terms of how it's putting these 3 shots together. I'm going to choose auto crop, and you can see for this particular panorama, I probably could get by with auto crop. It's, you know, I have a lot of room above the train, and it's doing pretty good. And, you know, I'm not really losing that much in the tracks down below, so I certainly could get by with auto crop. But let's see what happens if we try the boundary warp. Now, on this one here, what I found for me personally, it was kind of objectionable, is look what's happening to this kind of sleek locomotive here on the right side of the image. As I increase the boundary warp, it becomes less sleek, in my mind anyway. It becomes a little bit taller, a little bit stockier, a little bit chunkier, and it kind of loses some of that streamlined look. So I didn't really like that change. Everything else I really liked. I liked the fact that it almost kind of squared up the vertical line of this other rail car here beside the train. Let's turn that off. Let's switch to the cylindrical projection method. And again, we'll turn boundary warp up again all the way. So to me, I see the same problem happening where the train, that locomotive, is getting a little bit stockier. Not too thrilled about that. Let's turn that off. Let's try the perspective option. Now for this one, the perspective option is working. Of course, it introduces its own problems in terms of how much white area we have. So let's sort of see what that one looks like. And again, you know, on this one here, it's not so much that the picture is being expanded outward as the canvas is being brought inward. And of course, there is some distortion and warping happening to the picture to get it to fill and straighten out. But for this one here, the perspective option actually works very, very well. And I like it. The locomotive kind of retains that sleeker, more streamlined profile. Everything else looks good. However, this looks very similar to what I would have gotten if I had just left it set to spherical and turned on the auto crop. Not that much different. It looks like maybe I have a little bit more room. Well, actually, no, I take that back. I have quite a bit more sky room over the rail car here on the left side, and probably more sky area above the locomotive as well. So yes, I do. So, you know, it varies, but I encourage you to try out the other options. Don't just settle for the first option you come into, and realize that there may be some images where the boundary warp is going to work better than on others. Let's do one more here. I have 3 shots of a city in Germany. So let's just go again, photo merge panorama. And I put this one through the feature just because I wanted to see how it would work with, you know, a lot of vertical lines, things like that. Now, fortunately on this one here, there's really not a lot of empty canvas area that needs to be filled. So it doesn't take much to fill that up. And again, let's try the cylindrical method. Not a lot of difference, you know, it looks pretty good. And the perspective option on this one, again, not a lot of difference either. Let me actually cancel this one here, and we will look at this one to see what the finished version looks like. So this one here, it's put it together, very nicely, and I don't really see any, major distortion problems. I don't see any kind of exaggerated curvature, just some of the, lines here out on the side of the panorama. So on this one here, I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. So one thing to keep in mind about using boundary warp, and Russell Brown points this out in his advanced techniques video for using this, is that if you have vertical lines in the picture that are near the edges, it's very likely they're going to get curved. And he shows that in a video that he did where there's some trees, and you can see that the trees are kind of getting this unnatural curvature. So he does show ways to fix that using the liquify filter in Photoshop, and it fixes up really well. So definitely give that a try and check that out. But and also take a look at his video so you can see how to use this in Adobe Camera Raw. And of course, the great thing about the way Lightroom and Camera Raw here are assembling these panoramas is that it does so as a DNG file. So all of the raw information in your photographs is preserved, and you can come in after you've merged it and you can tweak your settings to your heart's content to, open up the shadows as I am doing here, maybe bring the highlights down, clarity, vibrance, whatever. So there's a lot of stuff you can do to enhance the picture after you have stitched it together into this merged panorama, because it is still a DNG file and it still retains all of the raw information. So that is definitely one of the very cool things about using this method here to create your panorama merges. Well, I hope that you found that useful. I think all in all, this is a pretty cool new addition to Lightroom CC and Camera Raw in Photoshop CC. I know that I will be using it a lot more frequently because it definitely is a time saver. And in most of the ones I've tried it on, it works pretty good. I mean, surprisingly well. There's always going to be certain images, of course, you're going to run into that may have, strong vertical lines on the edges of the images. Pictures of trees, forests, for instance, or architectural shots taken in the city, where you may have some problems and you may need to do some further refinements and retouching and modifications to correct for that later on. And again, do watch the video that I'll put a link to on the page for this episode, where Russell Brown shows how he fixes that using smart objects and the liquify filter in Photoshop. So anyway, cool developments on the Lightroom front. I think in this round of tire kicking, I think the tires held up very well. It's a pretty nifty feature, and pretty impressive to see how well it does it, and actually, how fast and responsive it is. All right, well, that is it for this episode of TheFIX. Remember about the book giveaway. Please do leave a comment on the webpage, thisweekinphoto.com/TheFIX. Find the page for episode 52 and leave a comment. Tell me what you would like to see featured on future episodes. Lightroom features, Photoshop features, plugins, other software, other photographers whose post-processing techniques that you like, and maybe you'd like to see their work featured and maybe see an interview with them. Let me know, and we will pick a winner from all of the comments, and we'll get you a book from Rocky Nook Press. All right, so in addition to the video version, which of course you can find at thisweekinphoto.com/TheFIX, remember you can always subscribe to the audio-only version of TheFIX on iTunes. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Seán Duggan, and we'll see you next time on TheFIX.